Hello, everyone. Matt Clark, research analyst for Money and Markets here with your weekly marijuana market update. Well, last week was a monumental week for cannabis as 5 states successfully approved ballot measures to approve cannabis sales in some form or fashion. First, I just want to take a deep breath just because the election was, stressful for some, intense for others, maybe a combination of both. It's been a wild week. But to kind of go over what happened last week in terms of legalization for the cannabis market in South Dakota, voters in a very staunchly conservative state did kind of what was unthinkable, really. They approved legalizing both medical and recreational cannabis use on the same ballot. However, the governor of the state and lawmakers are looking at potentially challenging the results. Not really sure where that stands just yet. In New Jersey, voters overwhelmingly approved legalizing recreational cannabis use. In Arizona, there was a hotly contested presidential election there, so obviously that was one thing. However, voters did vote to legalize recreational cannabis in Arizona by a pretty good margin. Montana is another traditional conservative state, but voters approved legalizing recreational cannabis use there. In Mississippi, this was kind of an outlier because it's in the deep South. It's a very traditional. It's a red state. It's a Republican state, conservative state. There were 2 measures on the ballot for medical cannabis legalization here. The state legislature put a question on the ballot that was fairly stringent on how they were going to use how they would be able to use medical cannabis. However, some organizations got together and put a question on the ballot that kind of loosened how medical cannabis could be distributed. And interestingly enough, voters approved the looser of the 2 options. But there has been a case in the Mississippi State Supreme Court just as early as this week to overturn the results. However, the state's Secretary of State and its Attorney General have both condemned the suit. But now those results are in. I have a map I put together to kind of show you the landscape of cannabis in the U.S. If you can see the map, green is where things are fully legal. Red is where they're completely illegal. Gray is where it's limited medical, and then yellow is medical cannabis use only. So as you can see, about 70% of the population, because if you look on the East Coast and then you have the West Coast with California, 70% of the U.S. population live in an area where cannabis is now legal in some form. I'll get to the impact of those votes on the cannabis business here in a bit. But first, I kind of want to look at a crystal ball and see what these election results might mean for the future of the industry. On Monday of this week, House leadership in Washington, D.C., have decided they're going to move forward with a vote on a bill to legalize marijuana federally in December. It's called the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, or MORE Act. It will also decriminalize cannabis and expunge convictions for nonviolent cannabis offenses. The bill has already cleared the House Judiciary Committee, and it will impose a 5% federal tax on the sale of cannabis across the country. That tax money would then be reinvested into communities that have been impacted by the war on drugs. But you have to look at the political optics of all this. It's not just as straightforward as some might think. The bill will likely pass a Democrat-controlled House because there's been a lot of support for it. Now that we've seen these other 5 states move forward with cannabis legalization, you're going to see maybe some even better bipartisan support here. But I suspect the bill will be what they call dead on arrival when it reaches the Republican-controlled Senate. Passing a bill in the House will definitely send a message to the incoming Biden administration. That message is that cannabis legalization is a priority, and it does have bipartisan support. Now, on the state level, if you remember the map I showed you, the area I would focus on is the Northeast, the northeastern part of the country. New Jersey voters approved legalizing recreational cannabis by a pretty wide margin. And I think you'll start to see pressure on other states surrounding it, like New York and Pennsylvania, to follow suit. It would be a big boom for the cannabis industry, as it would open up a massive population to recreational cannabis sales. Just think of New York and Pennsylvania and the size of those states in terms of population and what that could do if and when recreational cannabis is actually approved in those states. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio actually tweeted out and called on the state's assembly in New York to put cannabis legalization on its agenda. It's been there before. And it's been on the cusp of passing, but the coronavirus outbreak back in March kind of put things on the back burner. And the state assembly has kind of held off on making any moves in terms of legalizing recreational cannabis. Now, out west, you can see states like Idaho and New Mexico start considering similar ballot measures, as those states will see potential tax revenue leave their states for Arizona and Montana, both states who have legalized recreational cannabis. Now, as for the cannabis business itself, Election Day was a good day. If you remember in a previous marijuana market update, I mentioned that New Frontier Data, a cannabis research firm, found that if all those measures passed, it would collectively add $9.3 billion in revenue to the legal cannabis market through 2025. Well, guess what? They all passed. So if those projections are true, you'll see the cannabis industry could reach a revenue of $38.3 billion by 2025. To put that in perspective, the industry is looking at revenue of around $19.1 billion just this year. That is 100% growth in revenue in just 5 years. That is impressive. And the reason why that scales upwards is because even though these states have voted to approve legalizing cannabis, it doesn't happen overnight. It typically takes 6 months, maybe even longer, for the state to set up its infrastructure, such as a commission, set up its tax structure, and kind of fill out all the parts of legalizing cannabis. It's not just one of those things where voters vote on it on Tuesday and then on Wednesday all of a sudden it's legal. It doesn't really work that way. There's a licensing process to go through. There's health issues you have to discuss. You've got to work out, how the law is going to be rewritten in terms of maybe illegal sales, things like that. Is there decriminalization? There's a lot of moving parts to it, so it doesn't happen overnight. So you're going to see the biggest jumps probably 2023 to 2024, and then 2025 is going to be a pretty solid year. But it's still 100% growth in revenue from 2020 to 2025, and that's impressive. Now, the election results also resonated well with cannabis stocks. I'm going to talk a little bit about earnings, too, because it all kind of worked together. On Monday, Canopy Growth Corporation and Aurora Cannabis both rallied up 20% after both companies reported pretty strong quarterly sales and even better, or I would say less than expected losses. They reported losses, but those losses weren't nearly as great. So their earnings per share is moving closer to that wanting zero to where they can start turning a profit. Tilray Incorporated reported flat sales, a loss of about 2 cents per share for the quarter on Monday afternoon, but management said they were very, very close to being profitable. Also, something else to consider. Other cannabis stocks like Curaleaf Holdings, Afria, Kronos Group, and others, they all rallied on Monday after the election was called on Saturday, but they have suffered a little bit of pullback into Tuesday, and I think this speaks more to the volatility of the cannabis industry, and the things are still really up in the air in terms of federal legalization. Is the cannabis industry going to boom? I think so. I think it's going to. However, the question is going to be when, and until Congress kind of gets itself together and decides what it's going to do, I think you're going to keep seeing volatile ups and downs in the market. However, the election did put cannabis stocks definitely front and center in terms of investors. Now, cannabis companies are putting a lot of their eggs in the fact that, even more conservative states could be favoring legalization, and a Biden White House could push federal legalization and decriminalization across the country. And after Election Day, that's actually become a much safer bet than it was even just a month ago. So that's kind of my take on the election and how things have gone. I kind of snuck in some earnings in there as well, as Canopy Growth, Aurora, and Tilray all reported their earnings and fared better than expected. Not great, but certainly not bad, and much more improved from the first 2 quarters of the year. So now I want to turn to our cannabis watch list. About a month ago, I added a traditional tobacco company that's kind of making a turn into the cannabis market. Well, thanks to the 2020 election results across the country, investors became very bullish on cannabis stocks, and our watch list has actually benefited. Scott's Miracle Grow, which was one of the first picks I put on the watch list, really jumped after the election. It popped into positive territory by about 5 to 7%. But it's pulled back slightly. It's now down about 8.5% since I put it on the watch list in September. Now, as I said before, I think this is a result of early snow in the Midwest. We've got strong rain here in the South. And this is a fertilizer company by and large and does a lot of, lawn and garden tool things. And when there's adverse weather and when that weather moves in quicker than expected, then lawn and garden tends to suffer because of it. Now, another stock that we have in the watch list is Schweitzer Maudet International. It's been consistently rising since September. It's now one of our best performers. It's up a little more than 20% since I recommended it in September. Perkin-Elmer, this is a company that actually tests strains of cannabis for potency and other chemical properties. It's been in positive territory since September. It's now up about 7%, more than 7% actually, now that I look at it, since we put it on the watch list in September. Now, our latest pick here was Turning Point Brands Incorporated. It's our most recent addition to the watch list. I put it on in the middle of October, so it's been about a month since I've had it on the list. And since then, it has not disappointed. It's jumped significantly over the month. We've had it on the watch list. It is now up 27% in just a month since I put it on the watch list. So, watching these watch lists, it makes sense to kind of pay attention to them and to see where things go. Now, I've also included a chart to show kind of how all 4 of our stocks on the watch list have performed over the last month. And as you can see, each one of them have had strong runs of late, and I suspect that even more are going to be coming in the months ahead. The outlier might be Scott's Miracle-Gro, again, depending on how things play out in terms of weather across the country. But be sure to check out moneymarkets.com in the coming weeks. I'm thinking of another stock to add to the watch list. I've got a few in mind. I just need to keep kind of doing some research to figure out which one might be the best one to put on the watch list. But check out moneymarkets.com. Sign up for our free e-letter, our daily e-letter that comes out every single day. And I'll let you know when I'm closer to making that selection for a new watch list candidate. And if you've invested in the gains I've made since if you've invested in companies I made in the recommendations for the watch list, congratulations on those gains. Total are looking at between the 4 stocks gains of right around 5 to 6%. And in the cannabis industry, honestly, I'll take that. That is not bad at all, even with the recent run-up that we had after the election was called. Now, remember, to email me any comments or questions or stocks or anything like that, you can do 2 things. One, you can email me at feedback@moneymarkets.com, or you can leave a comment below on our YouTube video, and I'm more than happy to check those out. I've had a lot of people comment and ask about different things. I've got a running list. It takes a little time. I like to do research and make sure that I'm giving you as complete information as I possibly can, so I don't just jump to them right away. If you're interested in listening to the Marijuana Market Update before anyone else, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just go to youtube.com, type in Money in Markets. You found the video. It might have been a recommendation, but if you just go to our channel at Money in Markets, type in Money in Markets. We've got the green bull and bear logo. Click on that. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, and then you'll have a little bell that pops up. That's a notification bell. You can actually click on that and get notified each and every time we put out a new video. It works for our Bull and the Bear podcast, our week ahead, this Marijuana Market Update. Any video that we put out, you'll get notified instantaneously when it goes up. We usually post our videos about a day or so before we put them on Money in Markets. Coming up this week, we're going to have much more on the Bull and the Bear podcast, as well as our Money in Markets week ahead. We're just kind of getting out of that election fog. We'll see how things kind of play out over the course of the week and what developments happen. Also, check out Money in Markets each and every day for new content that provides safe and profitable investment information for you. Don't forget to sign up for our e-letter as well. We send an email to your box once a day. And you'll get all the updated, profitable, and safe information for your investing portfolio. So I'm Matt Clark. I'm research analyst for Money in Markets, the host of the Bull and the Bear podcast. Until next time, everyone, safe trading.